Hey legend, welcome back to the Triathlon Nutrition Academy podcast. I'm your host Taryn. I'm an advanced sports dietitian, triathlon nutrition expert and Pavlova lover. It's that time of year again where the silly season is well and truly here. The Christmas party invitations are rolling in, the drinks are flowing, and for a lot of triathletes, things can start to feel a little maybe off balance. Now, I'm not here to play the fun police. No way. I'm not going to tell you to skip the wine and avoid the pudding and just stay at home and wrap yourself in cotton wool. But what I do want to do is help you understand how alcohol actually affects our bodies and our performance and our recovery and ultimately your progress through this season as a triathlete. So you can be an adult and make your own decisions, but from science-backed information. Because whether you're mid-race season like we are here in Australia, or you are building your aerobic base in the off-season in our Northern Hemisphere countries where it's bloody freezing right now, or maybe you're just trying to not completely derail yourself through this time of year before your next big race as we hurtle into the new year. But alcohol can have more of an impact on your body than maybe you might think. So in this episode, we're going to dive into what alcohol actually does to your body as an endurance athlete and what the research says about its effect on training, sleep, recovery. And of course, I've got 7 tips for you on how to enjoy the festive season without sabotaging all your hard work. So let's get into it. Okay. So let's start with what alcohol actually does to your body, because it doesn't just vanish into thin air while you're cutting sick moves on the D floor. Alcohol is a toxin and it has a few steps to process it through the liver. And the enzyme alcohol dehydrogenase converts ethanol, which is alcohol, into acetaldehyde. And then aldehyde dehydrogenase rapidly converts it into acetate. And then acetate is further broken down into carbon dioxide and water, which are then removed from the body. So it's a big process. And we can process alcohol at about 1 standard drink per hour. Because it is a toxin, our body is just trying to get rid of it as fast as possible. It can't be stored anywhere like fat or carbohydrate or protein. So it does get processed in preference to anything else coming in. And that means your body does put on the brakes for any of those other important recovery processes or fat burning processes that might have been happening until it's got rid of the alcohol and it's cleared it completely from our system. So if you've done a big solid training session this morning and you're like, fuck it, it's a festive season, I deserve a drink, just know that your body is going to prioritize dealing with that drink before it does anything useful with your post-training nutrition and recovery. The other thing you need to know about alcohol is that it's not empty calories. It is relatively high in the kilocalories or kilojoules per gram camp. So if you're a metric system person, it's 29 kilojoules per gram of ethanol. And if you follow the imperial system, it is 7 calories per gram of ethanol. And a lot of people tend to forget that. Now, often doesn't equate to a lot of calories per drink, but you also need to think about the things that you're drinking with it and also potentially food that you're consuming with alcohol. Because if you are working off that alcohol and breaking it down to get rid of it, then everything else that you're eating just kind of sits there and potentially goes into fat storage as a result, depending on how much you're drinking. Alcohol also suppresses vasopressin, which is your anti-diuretic hormone. And that, as most people realize, does lead to increased urine output. Now, if you're combining that, say, with the heat of Australia right now, holy Jesus, and you're sweating a lot in training and even outside of training, just sitting down at rest, you're sweating, depending on where you live, then you are absolutely on the fast track for dehydration just on a daily basis anyway. Add training into that mix, add alcohol into that mix, and you're running the risk of poor performance, really poor recovery, slower cognitive function, and increased injury risk. So just be really mindful of your overall hydration status through the silly season as well. The other key thing with alcohol, which a lot of people really do understand now with the tracking devices that we all wear, is that it absolutely negatively affects your sleep. Even though you might think that you fall asleep faster or, pass out, your sleep quality and the amount of deep sleep you get and REM sleep is definitely disrupted and reduced. So that's going to lead to probably increased wake ups, or even if you don't necessarily realize you're awake, but you're up in that lighter phase of sleep more often, potentially poor hormonal recovery, elevated cortisol, and again, depending on how much you drunk, but higher fatigue the next day. And that can honestly, for some people, just be from one drink. So you might feel like you absolutely crash hard after even a couple of drinks, but you are unlikely to wake up feeling refreshed or ready to go. And you might think that you feel all right, but compared to somebody that doesn't drink or you not drinking, then you're not going to have as much energy. And for us as triathletes, that matters a lot when you're trying to train every day, and backup training day in, day out, it never kind of ends. Sleep is your ultimate form of recovery. So we just want to be mindful about all those things that impact it so that we can maximize our recovery processes overnight. Now, I want to talk about this in a little bit more detail, but alcohol inhibits muscle protein synthesis, which obviously is key for rebuilding and repairing muscles after training. Alcohol can also affect our glycogen replenishment, particularly when you're consuming a large amount in that post-training recovery window that's multiple hours long, and particularly also post-race. The other important thing that you need to be across, unfortunately, is that alcohol does affect your immune system, and not in a good way, unfortunately. And when you train a lot and you're under a lot of stress from that training, then that's obviously not ideal. All of that is going to impact your recovery, your adaptations, your energy levels, and even your body composition. So while one or two drinks occasionally is not going to undo all of your training, but regular and excessive drinking can absolutely slow down your gains, even if you're nailing your nutrition every day and in every session on paper. So how much is too much? Most people drastically underestimate how much they are actually drinking, especially if you've got, generous home pours of a glass of wine, or we've got festive cocktails happening. We need to think of alcohol or ethanol in units of a standard drink. So a standard drink is 30 mils or an ounce, a little shot, a measured shot. It is around 100 mils of wine, and a restaurant pour of wine is at least 150 mils, so it's even less again. It's less than a half a cup. And depending on the strength of beer, it's around 1 can, but beer can range anywhere from 1 standard drink in a can all the way up to over 2 standard drinks in a can. You can check the label though, have a look on any can, bottle of wine, beer, alcoholic ginger beer, whatever it is that you're drinking, and the label needs to say how many standard drinks that bottle or can contains. Then you can work backwards with how many mils or ounces is in there to understand how much you need to pour to be consuming 1 standard drink at a time. So just be mindful with that, glass of wine with your nice big fishbowl glasses that you're pouring to the top. That is not 1 standard drink. It might be 1 drink, but it's not 1 standard drink. And it's probably closer to 3 or 4, depending on how fishbowl your glasses are. Now, why does this matter for performance? Really low to moderate intake of alcohol can have a minor effect or minor impact on us, especially if it's spaced out or timed well, but binge drinking, which is actually more than 4 to 5 standard drinks in a session, which a lot of us just do anyway, that is going to have a much bigger impact on your performance, your coordination, your hydration, your recovery, even your perceived effort in training. And those effects can linger for some people up to 72 hours. Of course, with anything with nutrition, there are a lot of individual factors that we need to consider. Things like your body size, your body composition, your gender, and genetics all do play a role in how alcohol affects you. Some people think that they are piss fit and they can tolerate more with less effects. It's almost like gut training for alcohol. But smaller framed athletes and women in particular often experience a greater effect for the same amount of alcohol compared to a larger male. I'm not saying you need to go completely sober to protect your gains, but knowing your limits and planning around your key training sessions is going to make a huge difference in how you feel, how you perform, and obviously how you recover. So let's dive into a little bit of the science around endurance performance and alcohol. Because while we all might know and understand that alcohol is not a performance enhancer in any way, shape, or form, the specific ways it's going to impact you as an endurance athlete is worth understanding. Firstly, is a reduced endurance capacity. There is evidence that alcohol, even moderate doses, can impair aerobic metabolism during submaximal exercise and reduce endurance performance in the short term. I'm going to leave a reference list below this video so that you can dive into that for yourself if you want to. But several studies show that alcohol is going to impair your aerobic performance, both acutely and for the 24 hours after drinking. It's been shown to reduce your VO2 max, slow your reaction time, like and impair coordination, which is not great if you're going for a social group ride because it's a silly season and someone does something silly in front of you. You want to be able to react as fast as possible. And even small amounts of alcohol are going to affect your perceived exertion. So things are going to feel harder than they normally would, which makes sense, right? Alcohol is also going to delay your recovery from training and racing because it interferes with your muscle protein synthesis, which obviously is key for us when we're trying to recover and repair rapidly when there's not a lot of time to do that. It also is going to affect your glycogen resynthesis, so putting carbohydrate back into your muscles as your source of fuel for exercise, which again is going to be essential for us as triathletes who are backing up day in, day out. We need to do a really good job of topping up our fuel tank in between sessions. And that is particularly problematic if you are consuming alcohol in those few hours post-exercise where our body is just primed for glycogen resynthesis. So if it's a silly season and you're smashing beers after your long run, just know that your body is missing out on prime recovery nutrients and time, and you're going to feel a bit feral and you're going to feel a bit shit for a couple of days after that. Another thing to consider is the dehydration piece and thermoregulation, because alcohol can increase core temperature and impair your ability to thermoregulate as effectively, especially in hot conditions. So if you're dehydrated and now you've got slightly impaired cooling mechanisms, you're at a much higher risk of overheating and poor performance in hot conditions. And let's not gloss over the potential implications for your injury risk and reaction time. Obviously, alcohol affects your balance, it affects your decision making, it affects your reflexes. So potentially think about the implications for going for a trail run where you're meant to be hopping over logs and avoiding rocks. Crit racing, where you need that quick reaction time and the ability to think and use decision making in your approach. Or anything that you're doing that has neuromuscular control to what you're doing, alcohol is going to increase your injury risk during all of those sorts of activities. So dive into some of that literature if you have time and you are that way inclined. But the research does clearly show what we already know: alcohol is not going to help your performance as an endurance athlete. But for me, it's not about demonizing it and saying everyone should stop drinking forever. It's about educating you so that you can understand what's important and what matters and put your big adult pants on and make that decision for yourself, but know what the repercussions and the implications are of that action. I've got some practical tips for you though, so that it's not all doom and gloom. So now that we know a little bit about what alcohol does to your body and how it's going to impact your training and recovery, let's talk about what to actually do with that information, especially at this time of year where celebrations are nonstop, drinks are free-flowing, and I'm going to call this section realistic advice for the festive season. So bear with me. Tip 1, plan your sessions around your social events. So maybe that means shifting your long ride to earlier in the week so that it doesn't fall on the back of your work Christmas party. If you're going drinking or you're having a few drinks, then don't schedule or do any planned exercise the next day that is really high intensity. Switch it out for something that is low intensity, easy and chill, like a recovery spin or an easy walk or a recovery swim. or put your rest day there, because you don't want to have to turn up to a really hard session or your longest session in a hole, dehydrated, still half-baked from last night's Christmas party with an open bar. Tip number 2 is to hydrate like a pro. Okay, this is not very sexy advice, but maybe you alternate your alcoholic drinks with a non-alcoholic one. Opt for water or some sparkling water or something like that, and maybe choose lower alcohol content drinks. That way you'll be doing a bit more hydrating and less alcohol consumption for still one beverage. Now, I told you it wasn't sexy. Neither is cramping up halfway through your brick session because you overdid it with champagne the night before. Tip number 3, do not drink on an empty stomach. That saying that eating is cheating is silly. Always eat first, because that is going to balance out your blood sugar level response and slow the absorption of alcohol into your bloodstream as well. So ideally eat something before you go or before you start drinking that is relatively balanced. So fat, protein, carbohydrate, bonus points for some extra nutrients in there. But you'll feel better for doing that both while you're drinking and also the next day. Tip number 4 is really to understand your limits and set yourself a bit of a game plan. Now, I know you love goal setting. Maybe start to bring those skills into your drinking strategy for the festive season. So decide before you go drinking. What's your approach? What is your game plan? Have you got a set number of maximums that you want to consume? Are you going to do the alternating with a non-alcoholic beverage strategy I talked about in tip 1? Are you going to stop drinking at 10? Whatever it is for you, have a bit of a game plan. Write it in the notes of your phone, put it on the fridge, write it on your hand, whatever it is you need to do to try and remember that once you're under the influence, because peer pressure is real. And once people get started, it's really hard to stop, and you end up saying YOLO, you only live once, and throwing caution to the wind, and someone buys you a drink and it just escalates really quickly. You don't have to explain all of those life choices to somebody either. Just pretend you're drinking if you need to. A vodka, lime and soda looks exactly like a soda water with lime with no alcohol in it if you need to get crafty. And then you can have a bit more confidence in your plan and maybe enjoy being hangover free tomorrow. Tip number 5 is maybe think about the drink options that you're choosing and go for a smarter option. So maybe look for some lower alcohol choices like I mentioned, a lighter beer, wine spritzers, so they're mixed with something, a spirit with soda water like a vodka, lime and soda rather than a vodka Coke. Avoid the really high calorie, really high sugar options if and when you can, like the creamy cocktails that are made with coconut cream and sugar syrups and sugary premixed cans of things. Obviously, they're going to have so many more other calories with that drink outside of the alcohol. And then can you consider some non-alcoholic options? So there's non-alcoholic beer these days that actually doesn't taste too bad. I'm told. I don't drink beer. Non-alcoholic wine. It kind of just tastes like apple juice, but some of them are okay. Or a mocktail is another option. And there's actually quite a few brands that have created drinks in a can that help you to enjoy the festive season that don't contain any alcohol. For some reason, I get ads for those on social media all the time. I don't really know why. Maybe they know I'm a dietitian. Tip number 6, prioritize your sleep and prioritize your recovery. Definitely give yourself some buffer time between a drinking session and your next really hard training block. And your next really hard training session. Maybe you need to think about your nutrition differently. So you've got a different recovery plan, a different recovery hydration strategy. And gosh, sleep in if you can, or it's needed. But don't just keep pushing and burning the candle at both ends. You need to plan to adapt so that you can enjoy the silly season without just falling into a bigger hole. And tip number 7 is give yourself permission to actually enjoy this time of year. As triathletes, type A personalities, all or none, then sometimes we just don't drink. And, sometimes it's okay to live a little, have an occasional drink and enjoy yourself at this time of year. It's not going to ruin your entire season. That's not what this episode is about. So having a glass of wine at your work Christmas lunch or on Christmas Day is totally fine. It is dietitian approved. Yes, you heard that here. This is recorded. Oh my goodness. But enjoy yourself, enjoy the food, the drinks, the company without the guilt. because that is far more damaging than the odd drink here or there. You are allowed to celebrate. You have permission. Just don't forget the goals that you've worked so hard on this year and YOLO it. That's what we want to avoid, is that all or nothing approach where we're doing nothing and then we're like, who cares? I will fix this in January. It is a later problem. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to have intention and a bit of foresight and a bit of extra hydration maybe, and a sensible limit can go a long way to ensure that your silly season doesn't sabotage you and set you back a month or two in the rebuild. So there you have it, the truth about alcohol and performance from a sports dietitian to help you manage the silly season with 7 tips so that you can enjoy yourself without going cray-cray. I'm not here to shame your eggnog or take away your champagne, but if you want to start the new year ahead of the pack, not dragging yourself through sessions wondering why everything just feels so hard, then it pays to be a little bit more strategic now as we're heading towards Christmas, just like you do with your training. You've got a strategy there. Let's use those skills here as well. Remember, you are still a human. And if you want a glass of bubbles to celebrate and a second helping of pudding, I'm not here to judge, as long as you're making those informed decisions, not default ones with that, effort mentality. That's a later problem. So enjoy your parties, savor the pavlova, and maybe just think twice about backing up the work Christmas party with a 3-hour race simulation. Terrible idea. If you found this episode helpful, please flick it to your training buddies, particularly those ones that maybe think that beer is a recovery drink. And if you're ready to level up your nutrition in the new year, then make sure you register your interest in our next cohort of the Triathlon Nutrition Academy program. Merry Christmas, you filthy animal. I'll catch you next week.